Okay, gang, here's a story about my barn. Um, After my wife and I moved into this farmhouse, we moved in 2019. It didn't take very long for us to realize that we really needed a barn. We just remodeled the house and our budget was pretty tight, so I had originally planned on making this a total DIY project. But in the end, I ended up helping out or enlisting the help of a lot of my friends to get it completed in a timely fashion. Otherwise, it would have took forever. So I began by prepping the site. I filled and compacted in 12-inch lifts, sometimes 6-inch lifts, as thin as I could get them reasonably. I spent the better part of a year getting fill from anywhere that I could get it from, a variety of sources, and then I compacted it with a plate compactor that I rented more than once. It just worked out good enough that way. Coincidentally, while I was leveling the site for the barn, I actually came across a concrete pad that was buried. I asked the neighbor who lives up the road, and he grew up on this farm, what was the deal, and he said that an old barn had actually stood in the location where I was building my new barn up until the 1970s. The old barn had a complete gutter system, and it was used for dairy cows, but in the early 1970s and during one of the heavy winters that they had, the barn collapsed on itself and they wound up basically just burying it. The foundation and the concrete slab were too far gone for my purposes, so part of my barn is actually built on top of that slab. The old milk house was still standing and it's in usable condition. So we decided to attach the new barn to the old cement block milk house. We went with a 30-foot by 50-foot barn with a 10-foot ceiling downstairs, which accommodates my tractor being able to drive right down the middle of it. We went with a gambrel style roof in the upstairs. The roof is just over 15 feet at the peak in the haymow. And a haymow that size accommodates approximately, depending on the size, 2,500 small square bales when you take time and stack them properly. In the spring of 2024, I began digging the footers for the foundation. Because I planned on mounting the posts and brackets on top of the concrete, I decided to pour a 12-inch thick by 18-inch wide footer around the building. The entire slab 6 inches thick, and in the picture, this picture, I've begun digging the footers. Because rebar is relatively cheap compared to the cost of a cracked foundation, I decided to lay 5 rows of 1/2-inch rebar around the entire perimeter, as well as 3 rows down the aisles where the posts will stand in the middle of the building. In this picture, I've begun installing the rebar in the footers, but rainwater flooded my work site. Shown here, I used 2x12 lumber to build the forms, and I backfilled the forms with the spoil from the footers. I originally planned on placing the post brackets in place before I poured the concrete, which is what I showed here. I realized that this would make it impossible to screed the concrete after pouring, so I removed the interior brackets and installed screed pins instead. This photo just shows the barn foundation forms ready for concrete. I installed 2.5-inch conduit that I could run plumbing and electric through the concrete, although in the end I decided to enter the barn with the utilities at a different location, and I ended up not using these conduits. For this project, I bought a Bosch rotary survey level, which is seen here. I used this level to level the concrete forms as well as set the screed pin heights. Here's the concrete pad on the day we poured it. As is my luck, it sprinkled rain that morning, but we poured it anyway. I had to do it on a Friday, and I called in every favor that I could remember, and I didn't want to turn away all the help who showed up on Friday just because of a little rain. In this picture, you can see that we haven't set any of the interior post brackets yet. And shown here, I used a Fresno to finish the concrete. I didn't use a power trowel because I didn't want a mirror finish, which would be extra slippery for the animals and for myself. After the concrete had begun to set, we installed the post brackets using a string line and a grid pattern based on the exterior brackets. This photo shows a few of my friends who are the true brains and brawn of this operation. I truly couldn't have done it without the help of Jason, Mike, and Chewy. Here we are a couple weeks after the concrete had been poured. Rather than burying the posts in the ground, I decided to use steel brackets mounted in the cement, which I bent myself, and I welded 3 rebar anchors to each one. I also painted them. Unfortunately, I didn't take any pictures while I was fabbing or painting these brackets. I decided to go with 4-ply laminated 2x6 posts, which I laminated myself. I dried, glued, clamped, and nailed each post together in my garage during the winter before I built the barn. I realized a significant cost savings by building the brackets and posts on my own as opposed to buying everything pre-made, although it took much more time than I would have liked. Shown here, you can see the 2x10 headers, which encircle the barn with 2x8 floor joists set on top of them on 16-inch centers. I didn't use an engineered blueprint or plan for this project. I based most of my decisions on my gut feelings, and that's worked out well thus far. The roof trusses were built from 2x8 by 12-foot lumber using 15 30-second CDX plywood for the gussets on both sides. I used a free online tool that I found to calculate the dimensions and angles for the trusses as well as the gussets, and I provided the blueprints to my Amish friend Harvey, who constructed the trusses on site. This is another angle showing the edges of the roof trusses lined up with the edge of the barn. And nothing new in this photo. It does show a couple of my goat houses and some of the fencing I built, so I decided to keep it. The roof trusses were set on 2-foot centers with 2x4s for purlins. Without having any engineered blueprints for this, I was slightly nervous if these would be sturdy enough, but the winter of 2024 was a pretty heavy one, and for a long duration, this roof had over 2 feet of snow on top of it. It showed no signs of weakening, so I no longer have any concerns. I thought this next photo was an interesting look at the skeleton of the barn, and it shows the layout compared to my garage and the milk house. In this photo, we're standing in the center aisle looking at the corner where the steps were eventually installed. My Amish friends have just started hanging the tin on the exterior. This photo shows the framework of the hay mow and really drives home the precision that these Amish folks exercised. This photo shows the downstairs walls as Harvey and his crew quickly hung the sheet metal on the exterior. And this photo shows how the roof of the milk house was married into the roof of the new barn. This photo shows the hay mow after construction was finished. At the time that I'm recording this, there are currently about 1,500 small square bales stacked inside, with more on the way. In December of 2024, I began constructing stalls inside. My plan was to start with 4 stalls as well as a 10-foot by 20-foot tack room and office. That left a storage area under the stairs and 3 more spaces for stalls or extra storage in the future. I built 2x6 studded walls on 16-inch centers inside the posts, and I installed rough-cut hemlock and white pine horizontally for the walls of the stalls. Shown here, you can see that we decided to leave a small space above the walls of the stalls in order to accommodate airflow through the barn. This photo shows the tack room during construction. I installed 1 door and framed up another door in case we ever decided to divide this space. I used the same hemlock and white pine installed vertically after I insulated these walls. I got a couple double hung vinyl windows on the cheap, and I installed them so we could look out the tack room at the horses and also to let some more light into the room. The tack room has 2 man doors in case we decide to split the room, and so we don't need to walk around the milk house to get outside. Seen here also, I've begun installing electric duplex receptacle boxes. This photo shows the exterior of the tack room, although it's unfinished. Eventually, we did stain the wood on the interior and exterior of the tack room, and I installed several outlets on the exterior of the tack room as well. Okay, so this is the beginning of the electric service installation to the barn. When I originally remodeled the house and ran electric to the garage, it made sense to install the main service and meter base at the garage and make my house the sub panel. I didn't really plan on building a barn immediately, but laying out the electric service the way I did made it relatively easy to install a sub panel with 100 amp service in the barn. We laid 2.5-inch PVC conduit with slip joints on both ends and backfilled it in the fall of 2025. Seen in this picture is the slip joint and the LB on the garage side, and never mind the sketchy 1-inch PEX line running around the exterior of the garage. In this shot, we're looking back at the barn while we install the electric. As is the case whenever I decide to do any excavating, Mother Nature decided to dump buckets of rain that night and completely swamp my ditch. Finally, this is a shot of the front exterior of the barn. We built a 12-foot by 50-foot hip roof on the north side of the barn, which acts as a run-in shed for the animals, seen on the left. Well, as you guys can tell, this is a work in progress. It's not done yet, but it's usable the way that it is, and I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. I need to take a minute to thank some people who helped me a whole bunch. My friend Jason is always there, whether I need advice on welding or concrete or carpentry or excavating. He has great advice, and not only that, but he's the first one to show up and dig in. I can't thank Jason enough. Mike Dunn showed up on cement day with his skid steer. He gave me a bunch of good advice. He let me borrow a whole bunch of his tools, and he showed up with a whole bunch of extra help. So thank you, Mike. My dad, Andy, has always given good advice. He lets me borrow his tools all the time. He let me borrow his trailer for this project. I took it all the way to Ohio twice to pick up lumber because I got a screaming deal on it. And most of all, my dad has taught me pretty much everything that I know about construction and carpentry, and I can't thank my dad enough. Harvey, my Amish friend, who did most of the work on the actual structure of the barn. Harvey has always been reliable, trustworthy. He shows up when he says he's going to show up. He does what he says he's going to do for the price that he quoted me, and I really appreciate Harvey's help. And most of all, I got to thank my wife. She's always been supportive of my crazy ideas. She doesn't nitpick me when I, fail at something or something doesn't turn out quite right. She's easy to please when it comes to these type of projects. She's not super picky, and this project wouldn't have been possible without Megan's help. There were a whole bunch of other people that helped me, and I can't say thank you enough. If I didn't mention you by name, it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate you. So that's my barn project, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment.